Our next speaker is Dr. Bruce Durie. He's a Scottish genealogist. He ran the professional postgraduate program in genealogical studies at the University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, Scotland, and online up to Masters. In 2016, he was awarded the Fulbright Senior Scottish Studies Scholarship and spent most of that year researching Scottish migrations to Colonial America, primarily at St. Andrews University, Laurinburg, Scotland, County, North Carolina. And today, Dr. Durie is going to address us on Scottish DNA, breaking the logjam. Dr. Durie?
Thank you. One fan in the audience. Let's see if this is, yes, it is. Yeah, so we spent an entire year, my wife and I, courtesy of the Fulbright Commission, researching early Scottish migration into, let's call it Colonial America, particularly in the Carolinas. You heard Marjorie Harper talk about the spread of the Scots up the Cape Fear River Valley system. And there are more, today, right now, there are more people of Scots descent in the Carolinas than there are in Scotland. For real. Yeah, for real. And I think I've met most of them. Because apart from that big 1 year thing, as some of you will know, I spend a lot of time engaging with Scottish North America. We're over here, Caroline and I, probably 3, maybe sometimes 4 times a year, doing lectures, talks, workshops, we tend to get involved in Tartan Day events, but in the southern states, Tartan Day South, Tartan Day Raleigh, Tartan Day North Carolina, and so on. The weather's better, yeah? Although I have to say, Camilla looked after us tremendously well last year in New York. My son, didn't you? Right. As I've been talking to people over the last couple of years, a new sentiment is arising. And it goes something like this. We've just come back from a tour of Scotland, or we've just booked a tour of Scotland, and we're very disappointed because nobody can tell us where we come from, and they can't guarantee that the bus is going to go to the area where our people arose. Yeah? The reality is that, I'm afraid, if you get an organised tour of Scotland, it will tend to visit Edinburgh, Glasgow, Inverness, and maybe the Western Isles, and 80% of all tourism in Scotland is urban, misses out the interesting bits in between. And I keep saying to people, there is a way to solve this, actually, but it has to start largely from a DNA test. Hands up anybody who's had a Y DNA test done, right? Men, obviously, but also add to that ladies who've had a close male relative have a Y DNA test done. Yeah? Not as many as you should be. Right. I'm going to tell, okay? No, I guarantee you didn't. The Y chromosome is inherited by a man from his father, from his father, from his father, from his father. So in theory, the Y chromosome should follow the surname all the way back to the ark, right? It's not quite like that, but that's how it goes. And that's the great thing about it. It's absolutely guaranteed to tell you your patrilineal ancestry. The surname may change, we'll come to that. The problem with the kind of DNA test, there's only one company that does it, by the way, and that's Family Tree DNA. Is the FTDNA guy here? Yep, Ferdinand? No? Anyone who does, I hate to say this on record, but frankly, if you've done the kind of autosomal DNA tests offered by Ancestry and MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, you may have wasted your money, frankly. I could talk for an hour and 40 minutes on why that's the case. But if you really want to track down your Scottish surname ancestry, you need to get, either if you're a man, a Y DNA test, or if you're female, a male relative in that surname. Tie them down, get them hog-tied and branded, swallow them out, and get the Y DNA test done. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I don't know if the pointer's going to... Yeah, look at that. Fabulous. This is me in my biologist role, by the way, rather than my historian role. Okay. In case you missed it, there are a really interesting paper, I'm not going to read all that, came out just in the last few months, called The Multiple Origins of DNA in Scotland. It was in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. I've got a copy with me if anybody wants to read it. That's where you can get it free to download. And it was partly done by, got the names up there, no, Jim Wilson, who's an Edinburgh geneticist, and a couple of Irish guys, and they put all their evidence together. And this is not the Y DNA, but it confirms what people like me have been saying for a very long time. Some of you will recognise this slide from previous talks. The Scots are not one people. We are maybe 5 major ethnicities in one, and what you have is the original inhabitants of Scotland, the Picts, pushed to the east. You had the Brythonic, that means the British people, essentially Welsh and Cumbrian, came into Strathclyde in the south here, 700 BC. You then had the big consolidation, not a major migration, but a consolidation of something that had been going on for centuries or millennia, of the Dalriada Gaels becoming the Dalriada Gaelic people of Scotland in the west and in the Highlands, in the kingdom that was they called Ard Gael, the coast of the Gaels now called Argyll, and that's them. And then you had Angles, that's to say North Germans and Danes in Berenicia, Northumbria, coming north and interacting with the Picts south of Edinburgh. And then later on you had the Norse incursions, largely into the north of Scotland and the west, though there were some in here as well. The people who are quite wrongly, by the way, called Vikings. I hope Donna Heddle is going to talk about that later. And this has left us with genetic signatures in those places of those people. And it was great to see that this analysis of modern day Scotland of the DNA confirms that picture. People are, of course people move around, but there's still a big case for saying that these ethnicities are reflected in the DNA of those parts of Scotland today. In many ways, the kingdom is still the same as it was in the Dark Ages in terms of the groups of people. Fabulous, right? So you can find out where you come from. However, there's a problem. Those people who've had a Y-DNA test, and this is what people were saying to me, yeah, we got a Y-DNA test because you told us we should do it. And we got the results back, and they're very interesting, but they don't tell us what we want to know. We're disappointed. Why is that? They say, because we find we match with a whole bunch of other people who've tested in America, Canada, for example, but there's nobody in Scotland that we match to. Right? So we can get back to the immigrants into Virginia or Carolina or Chesapeake or whatever, but we can't find a match to anybody in Scotland. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the Scots don't take DNA tests, right? And in a very real sense, why on earth should we? We know who we are, we know where we come from, you know? So we're just not represented in the databases. That's for sure. Now, there's got to be a way to solve that. Oh, what did I do? Yeah, there might be some solutions. Well, some people say, why not test the chiefs? That's not going to work for about 3 reasons, right? Quite seriously. One, there may not be a chief of your clan or family. There may be no one who's like a genetic representative of the original patriarch or whatever. They just may not exist. That's one problem. Secondly, many chiefs are reluctant to take a DNA test because it might not fit with the story. Well, too bad. I mean, get real, you know. And thirdly, of course, 2 more points. Number 3 is, actually, the genetics of the chief is not necessarily a good indication of the genetics of the overall kinship. You take the MacDonald, the 5.5 MacDonald clans, for example. the Y DNA signatures of the chiefs are actually quite different from the vast majority of McDonald's. We understand why. They're, if you like, the aristocracy of the McDonald's are not the same as most of the McDonald's. And we know why that is, historical reasons. If you take my family, the Duries, I mean, we've been around as a surname since the 1200s, and we have a DNA project, but the chief's DNA is different from every other Durie, and my DNA is different from the chief's and from every other Durie. And why is that? Because in both cases, our lines ended with a female, an heiress, who married a guy who changed his name to Durie. That's a very common thing in Scotland, actually. It's called an entail, and it happened more often than you might think. So it doesn't make me any less a Durie, but my Y signature is not the same as everyone else in the project. And the final thing is, and Andrew touched on this last night, especially in the Highlands, surnames are a very variable thing. People would adopt the surname of the chief or the family or the clan of the land they were on just because they were on that land. It didn't matter to them that they started as Mackay, they would change their name to MacDonald or Ferson or whatever if they were on the land. A very good example is Fraser. To this day, if you go to Inverness and say your name is Fraser, somebody will say to you, are you a blood Fraser? Or are you a ball of meal Fraser, right? Because the first Simon Fraser, Lord Lovat, he offered anyone who was on his land, if they changed their name to Fraser, which like increased his tail, as we say, his following, then they would get maybe better land to farm. He would give them a ball of meal, that's 6 bushels of meal, to become Fraser. So there's no guarantee there's a genetic link to Fraser. In any case, there are 2 clan Frasers with 2 different chiefs, so where are you going to go with that? So the surname thing doesn't necessarily work in the Highlands. It works much more reliably in the lowlands and the borders. There's no point testing the chiefs. And other people say, well, dead simple, you just go out to the clan and family societies and get them to do it. Here's the other thing about Scots. We don't join clan and family societies. And again, why should we? We know who we are, we know where we live. You know, there's just no, it's a rare, small clan or family society that actually has any Scottish membership whatsoever. Not a problem for the big Highland clans. They've been very good at getting members in Scotland. They've got the DNA Tate. None of that, they don't need to worry about this, they know the answer. But the smaller surnames, and especially the lowland surnames, and some of the small Highland clans, do not have any benchmarks back in Scotland for their DNA. So no, you can't rely necessarily on the societies to find this out. What's needed, actually, is not just, yeah, if you've got the surname, you should get tested. What we need are people tested in specific localities that these surnames may have come from. Because people want to know, where did my ancestors come from? There's no point testing people in Glasgow, for example, because a lot of people moved to Glasgow. The reason it became, as Marjorie Harper said, the second city of empire, the second biggest city in the British Empire, was people moved there from the Highlands, from the rest of Scotland, from Ireland, of course, and it's a real melting pot in the same way that America is. What you want to find is the original location of your surname. There's a way to do that. First of all, I'm going to propose a project to you. I'm going to identify what I call the problem surnames. The one where there is no benchmark in Scotland, where there is not a large clan or family society to do this, where people might want to know where their ancestors came from. I've got a partial list of these. I'm going to work with Family Tree DNA and other bodies and agencies to pull that list together. I'm going to identify some individuals in those areas with certain surnames who I can demonstrate have been there for a couple of 100 years. Yeah? The point is not we moved there in 1970. The point is this surname has been here demonstrably for quite a long time back, before or round about the time when people were leaving to come to America or Canada, for example. Someone's going to have to pay for that, because the Scots aren't going to pay for it, you know? It's not in the interest, really, of someone in Scotland to pay for a DNA test to help a bunch of Americans and Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders find out if they're related to that. Okay? I'm going to give you some examples of that. it does require funding. There's going to have to be a fund to pay for this. I doubt very much if that funding will come from anywhere within Scotland, because it's really not any of Scotland's business, frankly. It's also going to require anonymity on the part of the testers. Here's the other thing about the Scots. We don't like people knowing who we are. Yeah? I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, yeah, we found out that we're related to this guy over in this part of Scotland, and we went to knock on his door, and he just wasn't very welcoming. Well, of course not. Nobody wants somebody knocking on the door and saying, hi, I'm your sixth cousin once removed from Saginaw, without any sort of warning. You go slam, shut the door, you know. We don't have a tradition of joining family societies. We don't go in for the big family reunions that you guys do, everybody getting together to celebrate a surname. We just don't do it, and we don't go looking for missing relatives in all sorts of places overseas, not to the extent you do. Now, I'm not saying everybody will get a bad welcome if they come to Scotland and knock on the door, but I can tell you 3 times it's happened to me. First time, it was great fun. A couple of young guys, and we went to the pub. The second time, it was kind of, It was 3 sisters who just wanted to comb through my filing cabinet. And the third time was completely unwelcome. 2 very unlikable people who more or less expected me to give them bed and board and then spend 2 days driving them about. With no warning, yeah? So imagine the answer they got. It rhymes with cough. Let me give you a couple of examples of this. I'm currently working for 4 people surnamed Graham in America and Canada. One of them, actually, I managed to demonstrate quite recently, to his surprise but amusement, that he's not a Graham at all. His great-grandfather was Polish Jewish and changed the name from Grahinsky to Graham just to fit in. He didn't know that. What was his reaction, by the way? Did he sell the kilt and take the broadsword off the wall and hand back the crest plaque and all that? He went, no, this is interesting, but I'm still going to be a Graham. I'm going to go to the clan tent. I'm going to march about with my name on a stick and going to do all that stuff. And he's not being quiet about it either. He thinks this is a great story. So he's told all his Graham friends, hey, guess what? We're Jewish, you know? And I think, I don't know, but I think they're planning a holiday over in what is now Lithuania to go and look for their family. So he's off the park, right? The other 3, 2 of them are very, very closely related. And in fact, they do have a paper trail that suggests they both descend from either the same immigrant or the same immigrant family who came into Nova Scotia, actually, in just before 1800. And they're very similar. And the third one is quite different. Now, the people who run the Graham DNA project have tentatively put the first 2 into what they call the Montrose Menteith cluster. So that's the same people as, Graham of Claverhouse and, Viscount Dundee and all that kind of thing, Tayside. And the other ones are border Grahams, tentatively. So what needs to happen now is for someone like me to actually go to Tayside, Angus, Western Fife, Eastern Perthshire, find a couple of Grahams who have demonstrably been there since, let's say, 1800, and get them Y-DNA tested. Somebody's going to have to pay for them. And then separately, go down the borders and find a couple of Grahams. I'll tell you why I say a couple in a moment. Find a couple of Grahams who have reliably been there since, let's say, 1800, and get them DNA tested. Why a couple? Because, well, as we all know, it's not guaranteed that your genetics are what they think you are. Anybody know the old song, your daddy's not your daddy, but your daddy doesn't know? Yeah, there's a bit of that. We have a member of our Durie surname DNA project who has a different surname. I won't say what it is. And it turns out in the investigation, this happened in Toronto. Quite clearly, a Durie has got into his family's hen coop at some point and left their Y-DNA signature, right? So either his great-grandmother had a very full dance card, or there was some other, what do we call it, non-paternal event that went on. Or it could have been an adoption. It could have been a kid was taken in and just given the surname, his surname, and they came from a Durie family, and nobody knew. There's no record of that. Could be that. So you've got to actually test more than one person. in order to get, and if the two differ, you then test another one and see which one is the majority. And let me give you an example of this working for real. I had clients actually in America and Canada whose surnames were variously Reddick, Riddick, Riddoch. These are all the same surname. They're not the same as Riddoch, which is a West of Scotland name, by the way. And they said they knew they were all kind of vaguely related, and they all joined at about 1830, and they imagined they came in to lower Canada, and then they've ended up in America. And where did they come from? Well, they picked a good example because these surnames in Scotland today are clustered very tightly in Clackmannanshire. Anybody know where Clackmannanshire is? It doesn't actually exist anymore, but it used to be Britain's smallest county with Britain's longest county name. How about that? And it's tucked in between the west of Fife and Kinross. In fact, if you drive through it, if you blink, you'll miss it. But it's towns like Clackmannan and Alloa and Dollar and places like that. It's tiny. And this is exactly where they come from. So, what did I do? I found, and Andrew will love this, using telephone directories, which are a fabulous genealogical tool, as indeed are directories, like, trade directories and post office directories and so on. And I found a family called one of those that demonstrably had been there way back to 1800. And in fact, they'd had a business there called this all the way back. So they were definitely from there. And I talked a member of this family into having a DNA test. He was very suspicious. He was very reluctant. Why was he suspicious? Well, I think, one, he'd watched far too much Miami CSI, and he thought he was going to get pinned for some murder that had happened 20 years ago. He also was worried about anonymity. He was worried about this was going into some American database of DNA, and would the FBI get it, and would he get pursued for child maintenance? And he had all these concerns, which we managed to allay, and I allayed them by saying, I will guarantee you absolute anonymity. Nothing will appear except your surname. I'll change your first name, and we'll put my email address on the test kit, so that all inquiries come to me, and I will not pass on any of your details to these people over in America and Canada. They won't be able to contact you, I guarantee you. So he went through with it, and lo and behold, guess what? His DNA and the DNA of these people absolutely converge at about between 1800 and 1840, exactly when they thought their immigrant ancestors came over. So I never claimed I could find the immigrant ancestor, but they are definitely these people from Clackmannanshire. Now, does that mean they're going to now get a group trip up and go to Clackmannanshire and go around the graveyard? There's nothing I like better as a genealogist than watching somebody walk into a graveyard in Scotland and burst into tears because they see the surnames of their ancestors on the gravestones. It's a lovely thing to watch. It really is. Are they going to do that? They may. Are they going to go and stand, have a selfie holding a pint of beer outside Riddick's pub, which is in Alloa? They may well do that. Are they going to try and contact this guy with the DNA test? Well, best of luck, because I think I've buried his traces quite well. But it does mean they can now go to a focused place. And here is the punchline, that is a far better deal from them than booking some tour that's going to take them to Edinburgh, Glasgow, Inverness, and a trip on the Harry Potter train, right? They're actually going to get a targeted trip. They can go all these other places too, and why should they not? But at the very least, they're going to go and see the place where their ancestors demonstrably came from. That's the pitch. It needs funding. Like I say, I doubt any agency in Scotland will pay for this. It's pointless asking the clan and surname family societies because they will only want to test people of their own surname. They won't trip into a general pot. And I cannot guarantee that I'm going to go looking for particular surnames, particular people. I'm going to find a list that needs doing and go with that. It probably will not involve the big Highland clans or most Highland surnames. It will necessarily be concentrated in the lowlands and the borders to some extent, because here's the kicker. 70% of everybody who came from Scotland to America and Canada came from the lowlands. Yeah? That includes the Ulster Scots, by the way, who themselves are 80% from the lowlands. So it's a mistake to not to automatically assume you're going to find a surname back in, my granny's Ainwee Highland cottage. That's a small part of the total story. So I think that's the way it is. So if you'd all just care to write me a check for about $5,000 right now, I'll take it back and start going. I've no idea how we'd raise this funding. I'm talking to various agencies, both in Scotland and in America. I'm talking to companies who can help. I've got the cooperation of some people who will help me do this. But I think that's how I'm going to spend the next 4 or 5 years of my life. And maybe I'll come back next year and tell you that it didn't work. Or did, yeah. And one way I'm going to pay for it is that as I leave here tomorrow, I'm going to steal that painting of Robert Burns and sell it. Because it's clearly valuable, okay? Happy to take questions. Oh, sorry, one other thing I should have said, I do apologise. A lot of what I've said and a lot of other stuff is in, you may not have seen this book, it's only about a year old, called Your Scottish American Ancestry. It works for Canadians as well, and explains quite a lot of what I've been saying, but also everything you need to know about being Scots in North America, some of which will destroy a few of your most, closely cherished myths. I've got some with me, only $20, and I'll be giving 10% of the proceeds to the library fund here. I'll even sign it for you at half its value instantly. Okay. Yep. You'll find that for 1 pint of beer, you can get a tremendous amount of information out of me. I am that cheap. Okay.